that is doing more to urge our Israeli counterparts, to be as cautious and deliberate as they can be in the prosecution of their military operations. You can't.
That's John Kirby. Jeremy, your response.
Okay. First of all, the United States has supplied an unending quantity of gasoline for Israel to pour on the fire that it has started in Gaza. It is an absolute obscenity for John Kirby to stand in front of the world and make such an audacious claim that the United States is doing more to help the Palestinian civilians than any other nation on earth. But I'll give you a concrete list of some nation states that are doing more than the United States. Ireland, which has opposed this from the beginning, has rightly termed what Israel is doing what it is. The government of Spain, the government of Belgium even has spoken out more forcefully than the United States. All of the nations that voted in the General Assembly for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, and the United States and only 9 other countries voted on Israel's side, all of those nations are doing more than the United States to try to help the Palestinian people. You know, you can send Samantha Power on a propaganda visit to bring 36,000 pounds of aid and have all the cameras around filming her talking about it, while at the same time you're giving Israel 2,000-pound bombs. You're giving them intelligence used for their Scorched Earth campaign. You're circumventing congressional processes to rush them new tank rounds. No, this is utterly obscene, and John Kirby should be entirely ashamed of himself for his conduct during this entire thing, Amy. The entire thing. John Kirby has been one of the most vicious propagandists for the worst excesses and crimes of the U.S.-backed Israeli Scorched Earth campaign in Gaza.
I want to ask you about a New York Times expose that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. Israel just canceled a planned trip to Qatar by the head of Mossad to resume hostage negotiations. Well, that's the latest news. His name is David Barnea. But this comes as the Times has published an expose headlined "Buying Quiet" inside the Israeli plan that propped up Hamas. It's about Israel secretly sending billions of dollars to Hamas over roughly a decade. The piece begins, quote, "Just weeks before Hamas launched the deadly October 7th attacks in Israel, the head of Mossad arrived in Doha, Qatar, for a meeting with Qatari officials. For years, the Qatari government had been sending millions of dollars a month into the Gaza Strip, money that helped prop up the Hamas government there. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel not only tolerated those payments, he encouraged them. And when the Qatari officials asked David Barnea, the head of Mossad, should we stop this? He said no. Jeremy Scahill, your response.
Well, what we know is, at least going back to 2012, Netanyahu has embraced this strategy that Hamas should be propped up in Gaza. It probably goes back much before that, but if we want to talk about concrete, provable facts. And in 2019, there's a quote where Netanyahu is addressing his comrades in the Likud party. This is in 2019, and he said the following, quote, "Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas." So what's going on here? Well, Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want an Israeli state, and he wants to make sure that no alternative place. Sorry, that doesn't quite well. Yes, well, he's also seems to be working very hard in that regard too, because he's making it less safe in the world for Jewish people by his actions, and he is, if you read the Israeli press, there's an increasing amount of criticism that what Netanyahu is doing is actually going to make the citizens of Israel less safe in the world, not more safe. But what Netanyahu wants to do is make sure that no political forces rise in Gaza or elsewhere in Palestine that can garner more support from the world in pursuit of being recognized as human beings, being recognized as a fully independent nation. And so, of course, he wants to keep the money flowing to Hamas. It's very good for his business, for his agenda. It's also very good for both the United States and the Israeli war agenda and war industries. But the other part of this, Amy, is when we talk about groups like Hamas, beyond the fact that there's a documented history of Netanyahu, for his own reasons, supporting the flow of money and the grip on power of Hamas, you also have the reality that for 75 years, Israel has operated a murderous campaign against the Palestinian people aimed at making sure they will never get an independent homeland. And when you do things as occurred in 2018 and 2019, like repeatedly gunning down nonviolent protesters who participated in the weekly Friday marches on the Great March of Return, and you had a Haaretz expose where IDF soldiers confessed that they were in a competition to see how many kneecaps they could shoot of these nonviolent protesters. It's sickening. When you see how Palestinians are treated when they do what the world or what others say they should do, oh, protest nonviolently, don't take up arms, they're gunned down by Netanyahu's forces. So why is there a group like Hamas? Why was there a group like the African National Congress? Why was there a group like the Irish Republican Army? Why would people support vicious entities like Hamas? Well, because they've been stripped of every possible other means of resistance by their occupiers, by settler colonialist powers. So when we want to talk about why is there a Hamas, part of it is people like Netanyahu and Netanyahu personally supporting the rise of Hamas and sustaining Hamas. And the other part of it is 75 years of history of constantly massacring Palestinians and showing them that nonviolent protests also will not be tolerated.
Jeremy, we just have a minute, but I want to go to your new piece out today. Headline, Joe Biden keeps repeating his false claim that he saw pictures of beheaded babies. I want to go back to President Biden, October 11th, 4 days after October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel, when he was speaking to a group of Jewish community leaders.
I've been doing this a long time. I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children.
He's lying.
I never thought I'd ever. Anyway.
So that's President Biden. The White House was forced to walk this back somewhat, but explain what he's talking about.
Well, in the immediate aftermath of the Hamas-led attacks on October 7th, when journalists, at first it was primarily Israeli journalists, went to the scene of some of the kibbutzes where the massacres had taken place, they began to hear stories from Israeli soldiers that there were decapitated babies and babies who were burned alive. And so I-24 News in Israel, one of their reporters, we believe was the first to report this and said that it was based on what Israeli soldiers had told her. And then that starts to spread like wildfire. CNN then picks up the report. CBS also did a report promoting the claim that there were beheaded babies. And then as much more attention starts getting drawn to it, people start asking the Israeli government, and Netanyahu's spokesperson then confirms that this happened. And then a few hours later, you have Joe Biden standing up and saying that he has personally seen photographs of it. Then when U.S. reporters started pushing on this and saying, is Biden saying that the U.S. has independent evidence of this? Then they had to say, no, actually, Joe Biden and no one in the administration has seen any photos. He was just referring to the media reporting about it. And now the Israeli government doesn't make this claim at all anymore. In fact, when Netanyahu has appeared alongside U.S. officials, or when Tony Blinken has shown photos by the Israeli government of the aftermath of the horrifying scene at the kibbutzes, he's never mentioned beheaded babies. Netanyahu said that they beheaded soldiers. But what is really perplexing is that the established facts that we already understand are horrifying enough. Why would the most powerful individual in the world find the need to repeatedly, not just once, Amy, he said it in October, he said it in November, and he said it a few days ago. He keeps saying that he has seen photos, and then his advisors have to walk it back. Also, the Washington Post reported that before he first said that, in a meeting with his staffers, they warned him against including that in his speech because they said it's not verified. So what you have here is this is one of the most incendiary charges that has been made about those raids led by Hamas on October 7th, this idea of beheaded babies. But if you look at the actual figures that have been released by Israel, and I want to be very precise here because it's very, very important. If you look at the actual figures, and I'm going to read this for you. This is published in mainstream Israeli news outlets. They said approximately 1,200 Israelis or Israeli residents were killed on October 7th. 274 of them were soldiers, 764 were civilians. 57 were police, 38 were local security guards. Among the civilians killed, there was a 9-month-old baby. She was the youngest, Mila Cohen. She was shot, and this is horrifying. She was shot as her mother carried her. Her mother survived, but her father and other relatives were killed. So you had a 9-month-old that was killed. Then you had 12 children between the ages of 1 and 9 years old, and you had 36 children between the ages of 10 and 19 years old. Where does this story of 40 beheaded babies come from? Well, Israel has walked it back. The reporters have retracted it. Only Joe Biden is out there in the world continuing to insist that he somehow has seen photos of beheaded babies when not even Benjamin Netanyahu, who absolutely would be screaming it every day if it was true, isn't going that far.
Jeremy Scahill, I want to thank you for being with us, senior reporter and correspondent.